The story of Acts has mission beginning at home, but our strongest opposition and harshest criticism can come from the people who are closest to us.
After Paul's dramatic conversion, he went from the Jewish leaders' rising star to a place on their most wanted list. He was seen as betraying their religion and culture. Almost everywhere he went, much of the strongest opposition came from Jewish troublemakers who seemed to follow his journey. They stirred up resentment in many of the places he visited. Jesus had experienced a similar response in his hometown, Nazareth. The people of Nazareth tried to push him off a cliff after Jesus shared his calling and mission with them in the synagogue. They could only see him as a carpenter's son.
When Paul returned to Jerusalem, it was a tense political and cultural situation, and he was obviously being watched closely. On the advice of the church leaders, Paul went out of his way to demonstrate his faithfulness to Jewish standards. But even these efforts to avoid offense were used against him. Only the intervention of the Roman commander and his troops stopped an attack on Paul.
Never one to miss an opportunity, Paul asked to address the crowd and retold the story of his persecution of the church and his transformation story. Paul managed to find common ground even with those who had been so recently beating him, perhaps a crowd that included some who had known him as Saul the persecutor years earlier. Despite the trouble that the Jewish establishment had been to Paul over many years, he still had a passion that they too might come to know Jesus.
How can you and I overcome the hatred responses that we may experience as disciple makers for Jesus? Number one, know that God called you. We are called by God to do His work, whether that brings shame or reproach. Move forward as Paul did, no matter the responses of others.
Number two, receive the forgiveness of Christ for your past. We may have a sinful past. People may remind you of the past even while you are living out the transformation that Christ has given you.
Number three, Paul accomplished the mission amidst the strongest opposition. Opposition may arise for missional work from our own people and home. Paul continued his task given to him with courage and faith in God.
Number four, value the church unity above our personal reputation and feelings. Paul stayed focused on the unity of the church and moving the gospel forward rather than focusing on his increasingly dismal circumstances and setbacks.